Hey everybody, this is Laurie Meyer from stampedgreetings.com, and today I want to show you a really fun card. This is a partial die cut. You can see that the die, if I flip it over, is only partially cut on the easel portion of this card, and it is really just a beautiful, beautiful card that is made with some of the elements from the Thoughtful Expressions bundle and also the gorgeous perennial lavender paper. I'm going to jump in and show you the basics of this. First, I want to let you know the pieces of paper that you will need. And the card that I'm going to make with you today, I'm going to use some slightly different colors. The card base that I used in the example that I've made is a rich raspberry card base. And I thought I'd just switch it up because there are some beautiful colors in the designer series paper. And to be honest, the Pretty Peacock is one of my absolute favorite all-time colors, and I'm so glad that Stampin' Up! Brought it back. It is out of stock right now, but hopefully it will be back soon. So I'm going to use this color to make the card that we're going to do today. I am going to use a different piece of the Perennial Lavender Designer Series paper. And if you want to stamp along with me, you're going to need to start with a piece that measures. This is actually one piece, and you'll see when I put it together that the pattern continues. So it started as 4 by 6, and I cut it so that one piece is 2.5 inches and the other is 3.5. So this ends up as 4 by 2.5 and 4 by 3.5. And it's kind of cool if you have a pattern that continues up through the card, because when you put your card as an easel, you'll see that the pattern flows. Kind of neat. At least I think it's kind of neat. So I'm going to use this on the card example that I will show you. And then I will use a couple of pieces of basic white. I'm going to get my white paper out of the way so you can see this a little bit better. They're going to end up being the frames for my designer series paper pieces, and they're going to be just a smidge bigger. These are 4 1/8 inch wide, both of them. So 4 1/8 on both. This is 2 5/8, so it's just a little bit bigger than the 2.5 piece of designer series paper, and you'll see that we'll have a nice border. So 4 1/8, 2 5/8. This is also 4 1/8, and it's 3 5/8. So those are two pieces that we'll use. I should mention the size of this. It's half a piece of cardstock. It's 4 1/4 by 11. We're going to score it at 5.5, and we're going to do some other things to it. This is going to be the base where we'll do the partial die cutting. The other things that you might want to have on hand, I do have a couple pieces that I have pre-cut and I have stamped, and they are cut using some of the dies from the Thoughtful Expressions dies. I love these. They are so much fun. They have some beautiful concentric shapes, and they work incredibly well with this gorgeous stamp set called Thoughtful Expressions. And let me just show you. There are a ton of dies that come in this set. There are 19. And I really love concentric shaped dies. And these are super cool because they also have the stitching that goes with them. I'm going to use the 3 large, kind of what we call these scallop circles. So I'll use the 3 largest here, and I'm going to use the 2 smallest on this side. And you're going to notice that I have pre-stamped. I thought that the sentiment "you're in my thoughts today" is just perfect. I picked some of the Perennial Lavender Designer Series paper, a pattern that worked really well with the main floral pattern that I'll be using. So this is going to complement really nicely when we get everything together. And I cut these pieces, the scalloped circle pieces. I didn't use the big one. I'm going to use that in just a minute. I used the second largest to cut my white background, and then I used the third largest to cut out the designer series paper. And they're just going to be really, really pretty together. So I used those two to cut those out. I stamped my sentiment on, you can see, the same piece of designer series paper. I used the Blackberry Bliss ink. I love this color. It's nice and dark, and it's just perfect to go along with the designer series paper. And I stamped that onto the DSP. Then I used the smallest die of these sort of scalloped rectangles. We'll go with that. And to complement that, I used the second largest on a piece of basic white. So these dies, I can already tell, are going to be some of the ones that I am going to use a lot. They're fun, they are incredibly versatile, and they're very, very easy to use. The last piece that I'm going to add to the card is the hummingbird. I am obsessed with hummingbirds, and I'm not embarrassed to admit that. The hummingbird that is on the card comes from the Thoughtful Expressions. And let me show you the example again. It is gorgeous. There's a lot of detail in it. And I stamped this image onto a piece of basic white. I used Memento black ink. And then I grabbed watercolor pencils. Stampin' Up! Has two different collections. These are old, I'll be honest. I know they have updated some of the colors to get a little bit more current. I'm still using these. I love watercoloring with pencils. It is so much fun. And I'm going to put a separate video out showing some of the ways that I use the watercolor pencils when I put this together. But this is my hummingbird. And I colored with the pencils, and then I used the die that corresponds with a hummingbird shape, and I die cut that. It is absolutely stunning. And I have made a ton of different cards using the hummingbird image because it is so versatile. It is just gorgeous. All right, let's get into how to build the partial die cut. And one thing I want to share with you is when I put a card like this together and I kind of play around with the design and figure out what I'm going to do, I always make a mock-up. And I do this using inexpensive paper. This is some paper that I picked up probably at Walmart. And it's just something that I can keep in my stash. I can write notes, make sure I know what dies I used, what the measurements were, and anything that I put on top to embellish the card. I can write notes on this. So I just highly encourage you, if you're ever a little bit leery of using some of your cardstock, get out some inexpensive cardstock first and play around with it. But let's take a look at this. Let's look at the mechanics of it. We're going to start with a piece of cardstock. And we're going to turn it into something that looks like this, but it's going to be in the pretty peacock. I'm actually going to turn this around. So I needed to figure out where I wanted to make that partial die cut. And I'm going to be making it visually on this side of my score line. So over in here. And I did a couple trial and error, and I figured out that if I made the cut start halfway on the left side, that it worked well. What does that mean? Well, that means, at least for me, what I did is I grabbed a T ruler. And this is something that I use a lot. You can get these at any kind of big box store or on Amazon. They're very, very, very inexpensive. And they are just great because they give you a nice right angle to deal with. And what I am going to do, and I've already done it, is I'm going to make a pencil mark, pretty light one. You may be able to see it. And I'm doing it at the halfway point. This is 5.5 inches. Half of 5.5 inches is 2 3/4. So to draw this line, I made a little tick mark on one side. I brought my ruler down, and I can put that paper right in the corner. So I know that I'm landing on 2 3/4. And I made another little tick mark. And then using the T-ruler, you can line this up really well, this piece right here with the edge of the paper. And I just drew a light pencil mark. The reason for this is I want to know where to start my die cut. So think about this. Let's just kind of think through this together. When you typically put things through a die cutting machine, and I have an old one. My old one is still working, so I'm still using it. But I've got my platform. I've got my bottom plate, a little bit warped, but it's still working. And typically I would put my paper, then I would put my die, then I would put my other plate, and I would run this whole thing through. And we all know what happens is when you do that, because you've got pressure that is being applied from the bottom and the top, wherever that die is, it's going to cut the paper. Okay, well, let's think about this. So if I want my paper to end up with a die cut that is only here, so to the right of that pencil line, how can I do that? Well, the way to do it is to get your paper on your platform. I strongly suggest that you take the platform out, that you have the bottom plate out as well. And I'm going to take the die that I'm going to use, and where that line is, I'm going to line up the middle of my die. So in other words, I've got this little bump here, this little bump here. They're halfway in that die. And I'm going to try to get it kind of centered. I'm looking at how much space I have over here, how much space I have over there. And then I'm going to grab some washi tape because I really want this to stay where I am placing it on my platform and on my plate. And I'm going to put the tape on. I'm making sure that when I put the tape on, that my tape is not going over the edge of the plate. I just want to keep it nice and clean. And all I want to do is I want to cut to my right half of that die. So here's how you do that. I'm going to grab my ancient die cutting machine. I'm going to get this out of the way for just a second and get my die cutting machine. I'm going to put this back. And then what I need to do is I need to put the top layer, the top plate, right at the edge, right where that line is. That's why I drew the line, because I want to make sure that when I make that die cut, that it's right on that line. So I've put my plate right on that line. And I'm going to just triple check that I have it exactly where I want it. And I'm going to run that through. All right, let me unwind this. And the cool thing about this is once you've tried it, once you've done it, your dies, your whole die collection will take on a different meaning, because you're going to be able to see dies that you can use on this partial die cut technique and create different cards than maybe you have in the past. I'm just being super careful when I pull off that washi tape that I am not pulling any of the fibers from the cardstock as well. And when I lift this up, look, only on that right side of the line is where I have my die cut. Isn't that cool? And it doesn't need to be a concentric shape. Maybe you have a flower and the flower itself is here and you have some stems. You can position any die and just cut where you want it to be cut. And then you have your partial die cut. Cool. All right, the next thing I want to do is I do want to erase my line. And I had an eraser. This always happens. I had an eraser. There it is. And I suggest that you use a pretty nice eraser when you do this. You really want to make sure that you don't have any of the residual pencil marks when you are done erasing. And this is just a nice one. I've had it for a long time. It works really well. I don't suggest that you use an eraser like this because you can see that some of the carbon from my pencil is on my eraser and I would probably get a smudge if I erase the pencil mark there. Now the next thing that I want to do is I just want to add a couple of score lines. That's going to help me fold where I have my partial die cut. I know that I made a line, a mark at 2 3/4. So I should be able to go to 2 3/4 and just do a little score. This is a portable scoring board that I got years ago. And it really does the trick if I need to bring in a small scoring board. I'm going to go to 2 3/4 again. And I'm just going down to where that die cut starts. That's going to help me make the die cut move the way I want it to. And now, if I fold that over and just make sure it's kind of nice and straight, and then I can burnish it, we have our partial die cut. Super cool, very easy, and definitely a wow factor. To finish creating the card, let's just kind of put this together. It's pretty quick. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to layer up these pieces. So I'm taking the basic white, the small designer series paper that I've already cut, and the larger, and I'm just going to put these together, just layer them up. And as you do this, as you create cards with this kind of design, and you are putting pieces together like I am right now, your mind is going to go to what else you can make, what other kinds of cards, the designer series paper that you have, and like we've already talked about, the dies that you have. And these are the kinds of cards when you send them and people open them up and look at them, they are so amazed at what you've been able to do. And yes, I did cheat, and I put the measurement on the back. But it's definitely a wow factor card with honestly not a lot of difficulty. The Perennial Lavender Designer Series paper has been incredibly popular. It is in the current mini catalog, and it went out of stock for a little while, but it is back now, and it is gorgeous. I will be ordering some additional for my stash because I love it so much. The smaller piece that is framed, the smaller piece of designer series paper, is going to go right on the front. So I'm just going to lay my card down. And what's nice is I'm using the Pretty Peacock, which is a different color. So I will be able to pretty easily see that border when I'm putting it back on. Just going to add that and look at the Pretty Peacock on all three sides, I guess, the edges and the bottom, and try to get it as straight as I can. I'm not going to put the bottom piece on yet. I'm going to do something a little bit different with that. But I am going to add a couple more pieces to the top. So I have two different patterns that I've been using on these cards. This is the one that I showed you on the example. This is the one that I cut, and I'm going to give this one a shot. I just think these are super, super pretty. And I'm going to layer my pre-die cut piece of Designer Series paper onto the pre-cut piece of Basic White. When I do cards like this, I will die cut quite a few pieces, and I keep them in a little glass container right by my work area. And that way, if I want to make a card, I can usually find something that is already cut, and it saves me just a couple minutes. And I feel like I'm also using my stash, because inevitably when I'm making die cuts, and I'm looking at the pattern here too, I'm trying to get that straight. When I'm making die cuts, I have some paper that's already out. I've got my die cutting machine out, and I might as well get some extra pieces all set. So I'm just adding that on the top, and now when I open that up, I've got some really, really cool layering. For the inside, and I'll bring back the example. This is an easel card, right? Because when we open it up, the back sits up. It's an easel. There's a stopper. I like to call where the easel isn't going to move the stopper. It's like a doorstop. Well, that is on, and the doorstop in this case is really the entire piece. This is going to end up being the doorstop on the bottom of the easel card. And the entire piece is lifted up by some dimensionals. But before I put that piece down, I need to do a little bit of decorating, right? I need to kind of get that piece together. And you can do whatever you would like to with this. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get my sentiment and my frame together. And again, the same Designer Series paper. The sentiment is from the Thoughtful Expressions stamp set. And I use the Rich Razzleberry for the ink. Just going to put this in the middle-ish. And I definitely use green glue. I love being able to move it around, move my pieces around before they get set to try and get them straight enough. All right. Now, what I did on the other card, and I am going to mimic it on this card, is I used some linen thread. I love linen thread. It is so natural. It is just easy to use, and I think it adds a really just nice finish. You can get some of the curl out if you run the thread through your fingernail. And don't tie a knot like I just started to do. I can cut that out if I need to. But if you kind of pull it through your fingernails, you're going to get it straight-ish. And what I'm going to do, because I just wanted to add a little bit of like a natural finish here, is I'm going to take a pretty long piece, wrap it around. I want to get 2 full wraps, and then I'm going to end it by tying a little bit of a bow. Now, you don't need to make this bow beautiful. You don't need to worry that it's going to be in the exact right place, because you'll be able to move it, and I'll be able to adjust it on the left and the right when I get it all done. And bow tying for me, it either goes really well or it goes really bad. Hopefully, well, or it goes really bad. Hopefully, since I am doing this on a live video, this will be one of the times that it goes incredibly well. So nothing fancy, just a little tie. I'm going to get those ends how I want them to be. I might make that one just a smidge smaller. and we're going to say that that's good enough. And then I'm going to put my sentiment. And here I'm doing a couple things. I'm looking at the right and the bottom, sort of trying to get about the same amount of designer series paper showing. And I'm going to go ahead and snip off part of the thread. I will use the paper snips that Stampin' Up! Has. I love these. Just snip that off. I'm going to do a little bit more snipping in a minute. Do you want to get that nice and tight? And this is where I can adjust how high I have my thread. And perfection is not where we're going for here, because we would be here all day. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to put my sentiment over the thread, and it's kind of hard to see, but I only glued on the bottom and the top. I didn't put glue in the middle, and it gives it a little tiny bit of a rounding effect, a little bit. So just on the top and the bottom, and I'm going to pull that right over to my bow. And I'm going to cheat and turn it to the side, because what I'm looking at is if the side of my sentiment and the bottom of the paper look like they're fairly parallel. And they're pretty okay. And then I'm just going to push that down a little bit. And believe it or not, we're almost at the point where this card is just about done. Now, if you have the fear that this bow might come undone, here's a little trick that you can use. If you get, I'm just trying to get a little glue dot. These are some glue dots that I had left over from a paper pumpkin kit. You can always use your take your pick tool. Love this. Super handy. And glue dots and I have a love-hate relationship. If you've ever heard me talk before, you know that. I'm going to take the wax off of that glue dot and attempt to leave it right on my take your pick tool. I'm going to kind of mush it up a little bit, technical term. And then if you want, you can sort of surgically put that little glue dot under, and it's going to stay. It will help that not come undone. All right, I'm going to do a little bit more trimming here just before I put everything on. And then I'm going to grab some dimensionals. Love, love, love dimensionals. And I am not shy when I use these. Couple of things when you are doing this. If you choose to make your bumper be the entire piece that you're putting on the inside, and if you choose to put twine, you do not need to put dimensionals over the twine. It might give you a little bit more dimension than you want, so I don't suggest doing that. And don't be stingy with the dimensionals, because you want your piece to lie flat when you put it on the inside. And just like you, I use every stinking piece of the dimensional sheet. Cut it up into little pieces if I need to, depending upon what it is that I'm working on. And then I'm simply going to flip this over, and we're going to work on the inside. I'm going to stand up, because what I want to try to do is look at all the area, top, bottom, and sides, and attempt to get that so that it has the same border right, left, and bottom. And then when I open that up, and you may need to give this card just a little bit of love on that burnish so that it is convinced that it needs to stand, but it will. All right, and then we're going to finish it up. So to finish it, I'm going to add my hummingbird, and I am going to use dimensionals. The card itself does have a little bit of thickness because we've got the inside that has the dimensionals on the bottom. And we're going to have our hummingbird with some dimensionals as well. I'm not going to put anything out on the beak. I don't need to put anything higher on the feathers because I definitely have enough that the hummingbird is going to stay where I want it to. And then I kind of cheated a little bit, maybe. I looked to see, on the cover of the stamp set, this is how the hummingbird is presented. So you could put the hummingbird on like that. You could have it so that it might be going more toward the flowers. It's totally up to you. The one thing I will say is that I wanted to have the hummingbird wings go across all three of these colors just to bring out that design a little bit. So I'm going to hold this open while I decide where I want it to go. And we'll put him right there. And then the last thing that we're going to do to finish off this card, I'm going to bring back the original example. You're going to see that when I put these two together, we're just missing a few little elements of bling. What's a card without bling? It's a naked card. The purple shimmer gems are part of the Perennial Lavender Suite. They are beautiful. They're currently out of stock, but they will be coming back. And I'm going to kind of mimic what I did. You've got two purples and kind of a rich raspberry color. And I'm going to use a couple of the different purples. When something is on dimensionals in the front, I like to tuck the embellishments a little bit behind. I think it drags the eye so that people will notice that what you have has been elevated, and it just adds a little bit of interest. So I'm going to put that down there. Then on the inside, I'm going to add a few of these as well. And again, I will kind of mimic what I did, just taking it off. And we'll go with the darker as well. And that's kind of nice because we've got purples and now we're bringing in kind of that rich raspberry. Then to offset those embellishments, just add a couple of little rhinestones, the basic rhinestone jewels. These are a staple in my craft room. As you can see, since there are not many left on this particular piece, I use these a lot. And I just think they add some subtle bling. I'm just going to add one more right underneath these feathers, again, to just draw the eye. So there you have it, a partial die cut card that was made primarily with the dies and stamps from the Thoughtful Expressions bundle. The stamp set is here and the dies are here. They are amazing. And also the Perennial Lavender Designer Series paper, which we all know is simply gorgeous. So two kind of takes, different color cardstock base, different pieces of the Designer Series paper for both the accent and the focal point. And then on the inside, pretty much the same design. So I really hope that you will give this card a try. In the notes or in the comments that I will add when I have finished this live, I'm going to put a link to my blog, and on that blog is a tutorial for this card. More than welcome to download that and use it. I hope you will. And I'll also have a link to my online store. If there are any items that you saw that you can't live without, You can just click on their picture and you will go directly to my online store. So thanks so much for stopping by, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. See you soon.